Hello there, my name is Simu Kai and I'm a Hoffman-Weidenfeld Scholar at the University of Oxford. I'm reading for a Doctor of Philosophy and International Development. In 2008, when I was a fourth-year medical student at Newcastle University, I decided to volunteer for 2 months in South Africa. I spent the first 4 weeks of that period working in a rural hospital in the Eastern Cape, and what I saw astonished me. The extreme poverty and destitution of the region was ubiquitous. In the hospital, there were bodies lining the corridors affected by diseases such as cryptococcal meningitis and multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. Pregnant women were being wheeled into the operating theatre, often with full-blown eclampsia, a disease that in the UK I had been taught was pre-modern. And by contrast, the latter 4 weeks of my period spent in Durban was an entirely different picture. There were high-rise buildings and hospitals with sophisticated MRI and CT scanning technology. Throughout that period, I began to think more and more deeply about the inequalities that I was seeing. And I remember reading a piece from the Mail and Guardian newspaper discussing the HIV crisis that held the country firmly in its grip. The journalist wrote, "Shelve the abiding fiction that disasters do not discriminate, that they flatten everything in their path with democratic disregard. Plagues zero in on the dispossessed, on those forced to build their lives in the paths of danger." That quote stayed with me for a very long time as I began to think where I wanted to take my medical training. I returned to the UK, completed my medical degree, and worked for 3 years as a junior doctor and as a public health specialist. However, my yearning to return to Africa could not be contained. I was then afforded the tremendous privilege of being awarded a Hoffman-Weidenfeld Scholarship to undertake first an MSc in African Studies and now my doctorate in International Development. Here I interrogate the political, economic and social structures within which inequality is produced and maintained. Being a scholar allows me to take a step back from the clinical interface where I'm dealing with the emergency in front of me to thinking about the wider context that allowed that emergency to take place in the first place. My current work takes a more honed examination of a cholera crisis in Zimbabwe in 2008 and tries to explain the crisis from the prism of state failure, humanitarian crisis, and international security. And it is my hope that through my scholarship I can contribute to the fundamental debates about justice, health, and inequality.
So it may come as something of a surprise, given how I'm dressed and the fact that I'm a master's student at Oxford, that one of my deepest loves is hip-hop. Hip-hop music. You can keep your new college choir, keep your Verdi. I like hip-hop music, I like thumping beats, I like fast lyrics. And while I was spending time in Oxford, what I realized was that everyone was trying to convince everyone else of something, but nobody seemed to be succeeding. Because everybody wanted to be the smartest and didn't want to be shown to be able to be persuaded. And it got me thinking about when I've actually changed my mind and how minds actually change. And I find that when I'm reading an academic article or I'm listening to a speech, I'm often in defense mode, but when I listen to music, that's when my mind can change, and that's when people's minds can really change. And I got to thinking about this in the context of South Africa and the things that I really care about, and the fact that I felt as though the South African state was drifting into a strange form of democratic despotism. And I did something a little bit naughty. I turned my love for hip-hop into a political song called Mr. President, which launched a scathing critique on the president of South Africa, Jacob Zuma. And the song was released in the lead-up to the 2014 election and shared on social media, and generated a really interesting conversation in South Africa. Needless to say, Jacob Zuma won the election, but it was a way of convincing people, of getting a conversation going, of critiquing many of the dogmas that people hold in their minds, and doing so in a slightly unconventional way. And I hope that this kind of innovative way of thinking about how to shift debates, how to change societies, how to innovate politics, is something that people can draw inspiration from in the way that I drew much inspiration from those who did it before I did.